General Hospital will reveal Christina had always tried to maintain a facade of strength and pride, but internally she was beginning to unravel as the consequences of her misguided actions slowly surfaced. No one could have imagined that someone like Christina would find herself in such a dangerous position, but one impulsive decision, one moment of mistaken identity, had nearly cost Rick and Elizabeth their lives. The car she thought belonged to Ava had in fact been Rick's, and in an instant, her misplaced rage became a sentence she had unknowingly imposed on herself. Since the accident, Christina had been unable to sleep peacefully, the roar of an engine echoing in her mind like an endless warning. Though no one had publicly accused her yet, the suspicious glances, especially from Lucky, made it harder for her to breathe each day. Lucky had been quietly investigating ever since he uncovered the blackmail plot between Ava and Rick targeting Alexis, and now that the pieces were falling into place, he was beginning to suspect Christina had a hand in the chaos. Meanwhile, Lois faced a completely different kind of earthquake, one that threatened to shatter her carefully guarded privacy live on stage at the nurses' ball. The secrets she had buried for years. A child she had given up, a fractured marriage clouded in unspoken pain, and a substantial sum that had been illegally funneled through her music company, were all on the brink of exposure before a watching crowd. Lois didn't know who held this information, but she knew they understood timing and psychology all too well. The feeling of being watched and threatened was tightening around her like a noose. Once a woman who feared nothing, who stood fiercely against the world to protect her family, Lois now stood alone in the eye of a blackmail storm far beyond her control. Molly was no better off, as the life she believed was stable and serene came crashing down. A strange woman had suddenly appeared in Port Charles claiming to be TJ's former lover, and worse, that she was carrying his child. Molly had dismissed it as a cheap scheme to destroy her family, but a secretly conducted DNA test she herself arranged confirmed the devastating truth. Years of trust and shared struggle had been undone with a single piece of paper. Molly found herself not only questioning the man she had built a life with but wondering if she had been blind to the subtle fractures in their relationship all along, too enamored with the illusion of perfection. Carly, on the other hand, was feeling the crushing weight of legal battles tightening from every direction. The nurses' ball wasn't just a celebration of art anymore, it was becoming a battlefield for calculated exposure and political maneuvering. Carly received an anonymous letter threatening to release recordings of confidential conversations between her and Drew regarding manipulated financial results at Aurora Media. What made it worse was the timestamp. The conversation had taken place when Carly was convinced no one could possibly be listening. The person who had obtained this must not only be intelligent but close, possibly someone from her own inner circle. If this tape were released during the high-profile event, Carly's reputation would implode, and Aurora's future could crumble overnight. Sasha, who had fought her way out of addiction and years of psychological trauma, was now being pulled back into darkness. The same woman who had once posed as her biological mother in a long-forgotten media scam had resurfaced, this time with documents suggesting Sasha may not have been adopted at all, but rather stolen at birth in a hospital switch. This revelation crushed the foundations of Sasha's world, driving her into a frantic search for the truth behind her identity. Each step in that journey was riddled with danger, manipulation, and the haunting suspicion that she was once again being controlled by unseen forces pulling her strings for a darker agenda. Nina, too, stood on the edge of implosion. The strain in her relationship with Sunny, the endless feuds with Carly, and the guilt of being unable to connect with Willow had all begun to erode her mental stability. At the nurses' ball, catching Sunny in a seemingly intimate conversation with Ava finally triggered her collapse. In front of a stunned crowd, Nina exploded in a very public confrontation, unleashing weeks of suppressed emotion. The spectacle went viral within hours, resulting in her removal from Crimson's board and a tidal wave of social backlash. Not only had she lost her professional standing, but she now faced the imminent loss of Sunny and the last fading hope of reconciliation with her daughter, all because of one moment she couldn't control. Last among them was Alexis, once the moral backbone of her family, now dragged into a spiral of accusations she had never intended to invite. The blackmail she had endured in silence from Ava and Rick had finally come to light, but instead of garnering sympathy, it brought scrutiny and condemnation. Many now believed Alexis to have been complicit, or worse, orchestrating the events from the shadows. Her years of silence, meant to protect those she loved, were being weaponized against her. Now standing at the precipice, Alexis faced a harrowing decision. Tell the truth and risk everything, or remain silent and let her daughter carry the burden of a crime she never committed. 7 women, 7 crises poised to detonate, all converging at the nurses' ball, a night meant for unity and compassion, now transforming into a cataclysmic display of secrets surfacing and reputations crumbling. As the music fades and the spotlight shifts, Port Charles is about to bear witness to a reckoning unlike any before, where no one walks away unscathed. Even if Christina ultimately surrenders and agrees to psychiatric commitment with Diane advocating on her behalf, the damage she has inflicted on her relationship with Molly may be beyond repair. They had only just begun to heal after the surrogacy disaster and the heartbreak of losing the baby. But learning that Christina's mental instability nearly cost the life of their father Rick may be the final blow Molly cannot forgive. The fracture between the sisters deepens into something far more permanent as Molly wrestles with the unbearable truth that Christina's reckless behavior may have nearly killed someone she loves, again. For Christina, this misstep could cost her more than her freedom, it could cost her her sister forever. The truth is beginning to emerge, and when it fully comes to light, the consequences could range from incarceration to a long-term stay at Shady Brook. While Christina's world teeters on the edge of destruction, Ava's is imploding in real time. Her calculated blackmail plot, constructed with the cold precision of someone who's lived too long on the edge, is crumbling before her eyes. Alexis has been working tirelessly to dismantle Ava's scheme and, with the skilled assistance of Spinelli and his expert hacking abilities, she may finally succeed. But Ava is not easily outmaneuvered. Aware that Alexis was targeting the vehicle containing incriminating evidence, Ava moved Rick's car before Alexis could sabotage it, leaving behind a taunting note as a final jab. Yet even her defiant cleverness may not save her now. As the final pieces fall into place, Ava faces complete ruin, financially, socially, and legally. Her gallery stands at risk, her recent acquisitions may be seized, and bankruptcy looms yet again. With Lucky now entrenched in the investigation, he will stop at nothing to bring her down. The once formidable Ava stands to lose everything. As if that weren't enough, the repercussions may reach even further. Once Sunny uncovers the truth about Ava's attempt to blackmail Alexis, the fragile peace they had established over Avery could be shattered. Their shared custody agreement had been designed to protect Avery while Sunny recovered from heart surgery, but now that he's regained his strength and control over his life, he might choose to revoke that agreement entirely. The betrayal could fuel him to launch a full custody battle, one Ava may not be equipped to win. As the walls close in, Ava's grip on her freedom, her finances, and even her child grows weaker by the day. Molly, meanwhile, finds herself spiraling in a storm she never asked for, a casualty of others' poor decisions. Unlike the chaos makers around her, she never sought conflict, never aimed to manipulate, never wanted anything more than a stable life with TJ. But one by one, her dreams unraveled. First came the tragedy of Christina's failed surrogacy, a plan that ended not only in loss but in broken trust and emotional carnage. Then came the shattering revelation that Christina had once again acted recklessly, this time putting their father's life in jeopardy. The realization lands like a knife in Molly's chest. She feels blindsided, betrayed by the sister who once vowed to change, and heartbroken that their mother continues to protect Christina at any cost. Worse still, Christina had the audacity to sit at Rick's bedside, feigning concern and sympathy as he fought for his life after undergoing a critical surgery. Despite being the very person responsible for the accident that put him there. To Molly, the deceit is unforgivable. The betrayal runs deep, not only from Christina but from Alexis, whose continued protection of her troubled daughter feels like an abandonment of Molly herself. The family dynamics that once bound them together are unraveling, each thread pulling tighter around Molly's sense of isolation and hurt. Adding insult to injury is the emerging knowledge that Rick himself has been involved in blackmailing Alexis, forcing Molly to question if she has ever truly known either of her parents. It is a moment of emotional reckoning that shatters her perception of family, trust, and the possibility of healing. Elsewhere, Portia's perfectly controlled exterior is cracking under the weight of deception. Her attempts to cover up past misdeeds are catching up to her quickly, and the consequences could be devastating. While she had once confided in Curtis about Brad's blackmail regarding her interference with Heather's test results, seemingly neutralizing the threat, she now faces a far more dangerous adversary. Drew, having been fed information by Brad, has begun leveraging it against her for his own purposes. Worse still, Drew has uncovered details surrounding the ketamine incident, information Portia believed to be well hidden. She remains unaware that Drew knows, but the truth is circling closer each day. Curtis, a man who values transparency above all else, may not be able to overlook her continued lies. Should he discover how much Portia has withheld from him, it could mark the end of their marriage, the collapse of her career, and possibly her freedom. The weight of the legal consequences she could face, including the possibility of imprisonment, casts a dark shadow over every decision she makes. Her medical license, her professional reputation, and her place in the community are all at stake. The life she so carefully rebuilt is now one misstep away from complete ruin. As each woman stands on the precipice of her own undoing, the threads connecting their crises tighten, intertwining into a tapestry of betrayal, reckoning, and emotional devastation. What began as isolated incidents have evolved into an explosive convergence of consequences, each threatening to destroy not only personal relationships but entire lives. The choices made in desperation, the lies told to protect or control, and the secrets hidden out of fear are now rising to the surface. In the coming days, as more truths are revealed and more alliances fracture, Port Charles will become ground zero for a reckoning none of them will be able to escape. For Christina, Ava, Molly, Alexis, Portia, and the others caught in this storm, there is no going back, only forward into the fire. Here is the English rewrite of the new General Hospital spoilers you provided, written as a continuous, detailed, and emotionally dramatic narrative, maintaining logical structure and deepening the stakes for each character while avoiding headings or dialogue. Nina's descent into turmoil was no longer isolated. The chaos surrounding her life was now deeply entangled with Portia's growing crisis, as the two women had formed a fragile, secretive alliance with a shared goal, taking down Drew. What began as quiet maneuvering in back rooms had escalated into something far more dangerous. Portia, once a respected doctor with a pristine reputation, had stepped into a web of blackmail and deceit that threatened to consume both women. Brad had come forward with damning information, linking Portia to the misuse of ketamine and accusing her of manipulating test results and medical records. Though Portia tried to neutralize the threat by confessing pieces of the truth to Curtis, the damage had already been set in motion. Now, with Drew meticulously piecing together every fragment of betrayal, it wouldn't be long before he uncovered the full extent of Portia and Nina's collusion. Drew's awareness had been sharpened further when he realized that Jacinda had become a target of Nina's manipulations, a revelation brought to him by Ezra, who had been quietly watching from the shadows. Each thread led back to Nina. Her fingerprints were on every deceptive move made in recent months. Once Drew connected the final dots, the fallout would be catastrophic. If he exposed their partnership, Nina wouldn't just face legal consequences, she could lose everything. Her already fragile relationship with Willow could collapse entirely, especially if it were revealed that Nina had been involved in drugging Drew and scheming to keep him away from Willow. Willow, for her part, was already standing on shaky ground. Emotionally torn and physically fragile, she had begun to question her own decisions, particularly her brief involvement with Drew. But what she didn't realize was how deeply she had been manipulated by the very people she once thought she could trust. Carly and Nina, despite their mutual contempt, had played overlapping roles in ensuring that Willow and Drew's connection remained strained and vulnerable. Carly, ever strategic, had begun using Drew's unraveling situation as ammunition in her own quiet campaign to gain custody of Willow's children. Her plan, subtle but ruthless, involved casting doubt on Willow's judgment, painting her association with Drew as unstable, even dangerous. But the most harrowing revelation was yet to come. When Willow discovered that Nina had been orchestrating a long-term plan to keep Drew emotionally and physically distant from her, manipulating his actions, sabotaging his choices, and possibly even administering drugs to control his state of mind, it would devastate her. The trust she had been slowly rebuilding with her mother would evaporate instantly. Drew's own confession, that Nina had spent months by his side under the guise of support, while secretly managing him like a pawn, would leave Willow emotionally gutted. She would find herself cornered by betrayal from every direction, her identity as a mother, wife, and daughter under siege all at once. Amidst this storm of custody battles and personal implosions, another truth was preparing to erupt. Lois, who had spent years weaving a careful web of lies to protect what she believed was the greater good, was on the verge of seeing that web unravel. The truth about her son, Gio, conceived in secrecy and hidden from almost everyone except Gloria, was finally clawing its way to the surface. Lois had spent years hiding the boy's true parentage not only from Gio himself but also from Brooklyn and Ned. What she believed was maternal protection was about to be revealed as a devastating deception. Gio, unaware of the storm building around his existence, was beginning to question the inconsistencies in his past. And when the truth emerged, that Lois had manipulated everyone around her to keep his identity secret, it would shatter the fragile trust he had placed in the only family he knew. Brooklyn, already struggling with her own emotional entanglements, would be blindsided by the realization that her mother had lied to her for years, not out of necessity, but out of fear and pride. Ned, too, would be enraged at being cut out of such a critical truth, especially considering the ripple effects that secret had caused within the Quartermain family. But the one whose reaction could prove most dangerous was Dante. As Joe's biological father, he had every right to know, and the fact that this knowledge had been deliberately kept from him would ignite a fury no one could predict. His sense of betrayal would be profound, compounded by the fact that he had unknowingly crossed paths with his own son for years. The one person who might still defend Lois, even as the world turned against her, was Gloria, the grandmother who had been complicit in every cover-up. But even her support might not be enough to shield Lois from the consequences this time. In the days to come, these interconnected stories would converge into one volatile, emotional crescendo. The secrets were too many, the lies too intricate, the betrayals too deep. Nina stood to lose her daughter, her freedom, and any remaining semblance of credibility. Willow faced the erosion of her own family and maternal rights, buried under the weight of manipulation she never saw coming. Portia risked everything, her marriage, career, and liberty, in an effort to control a narrative that was already spiraling beyond her grasp. And Lois, once simply a protective mother, was now at the epicenter of a family reckoning decades in the making. What united these women now was not strength or loyalty, but crisis, and the looming reality that nothing would remain hidden for much longer. As the truth barrels toward them with relentless force, each will be forced to reckon with the consequences of their choices and the relationships they sacrificed in the name of love, control, or survival. Port Charles will not be the same. And neither will they.